Okay? No. Come on, it's not proofs, man. These are the balls that they illustrate their polls with. There's a screen grab, and it's from the night of November 2nd, or the just after 1 a.m. on November 3rd, and it says, it's the exit polls from Ohio, and it says that John Kerry defeated George Bush among men by 51% to 49%. However, among women, George Bush lost to John Kerry by 47% to 53%. Okay, class, what's the third sex that put George?
The black?
Maybe Greg can explain it to us. I don't mind Republicans marrying at all. I don't see what's I don't like when they flaunt it. The flaming ones. Anyway, so what is that third sex? We call them the disappeared. See, in Ohio, George Bush won by a few thousand votes, not counting 153,237 votes. Not counting 153,237 votes that were cast and not counted. Now, how does that happen? Well, first, that's Ohio. But what about in the United States of America? 3 of you got that. 3,006,380 votes cast and not counted in the United States of America. How does that happen? They call them rejected votes, residual votes. Spoiled votes is the voting biz term, spoiled. And how do you spoil votes? Leave them out of the fridge? Let's investigate. The question is, whose votes spoiled? Well, I went into the dumpster of spoiled votes, the stinky little dumpster, with statisticians from Harvard Law School, from the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, and we pulled out the spoiled votes from the white majority precincts and made a pile. Then we pulled out the votes from the black majority precinct and made a pile. It's in the book, in Armmed Madhouse. See the long black stick there. Okay, if you are African American in the United States of America, the chance your vote, when you cast it, will be counted. Will not be counted. Is 900% higher than if you're a white American. If you're Hispanic, the chance your vote will not be counted for some reason is 500% higher than if you're white. And if you're a Native American, the chance your vote won't get counted if you cast it is about 2,000% higher than if you're a pale face. No kidding. Now, let's go through the arithmetic, okay? Forget Ohio. Let's go to New Mexico, all right? Where George Bush won the election by 5,900 votes. Not counting over 30,000 ballots. Whose ballots? You do the arithmetic. 900% x times y, the 500x plus 2,000. If you went through if you survived the No Child's Behind Left program, you would know that, do the arithmetic, it's 88% of the votes not counted, the 30,000 votes not counted were cast in minority precincts, 88%. You tell me who won. So John Kerry won, now get over it. Because they're taking 2008 right now. How do you disappear these votes? 3 million votes. And how are they going to disappear 4.5 million in 2008? Okay. How do I know? I know how. Because Karl Rove sent me some emails. The House Judiciary Committee, they got a couple thousand, but they're missing something. Can you imagine? Sent out from the Republican National Committee. And I have 500 of them. 500. now. So Karl Rove sent them to me. I wonder why. Well, I know that people think Karl Rove is an evil genius. That's only half right. He's actually not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Don't let him scare you. Because when they were typing in their little nasty little missives, the plan, the scheme for 2004 and the scheme for 2008, they really do send these missives to each other at georgewbush.com, and then some of them, they mistype and they put georgewbush.org, which is a website owned by a friend of mine who then sent them to me. Now, BBC, where I work, I do investigative reporting, which, you know, is not permitted in the United States under Patriot Act 3, so I do it from. So these emails came in, and my first thought is, can I read Karl Rove's private emails? BBC said only if there's evidence of criminality. Rove? Criminal? So we went through them. We're still going through them, by the way. 70 of them had something attached to them called a caging list. Here's a caging list, What's a caging list? Okay, so we don't know. And so we start, these were Excel sheets with zillions of names. Well, I should say zillions. There were 50,000 names in one state, hundreds of thousands of names. We started plotting them on maps, you know, against the demographics. Oh, by the way, a 60 Minutes producer came into our office, I kid you not, and said, my God, to figure out what that stuff is, you'd have to spend hundreds of hours and make hundreds of phone calls. And I turned to my chief investigator. I said, when did you last sleep? He said, 88, 90 hours ago. And I said, that's called reporting. Try it, it won't hurt. In fact, I said, it's the Yogi Berra rule of investigative reporting. He was a great journalist, because what he said was, it's amazing what you will see when you look. So we started plotting this stuff, and it was all names in black majority precincts and Hispanic precincts. Now why would they do that? Maybe a welcome committee. I don't know. The BBC said, Greg, you gotta go, and you can't just we went to experts who had ideas of what it should be, but BBC said you have to go to and ask. So I went to Karl's office and said, are you missing something? If you tell me what it is, I'll give it back to you. They threw us out, and so we went, but then they sent us a Republican spokeswoman and her henchman, and he started babbling. There are Bush-Cheney donor lists. Now we had sheet after sheet. So I said, okay, look, there's a whole bunch of names here at 234 State Street in Jacksonville, which is the Jackson Street Rescue Mission for the Homeless. And you have a lot of Bush-Cheney fundraisers there, $500 a plate. You get to answer the question twice at BBC. First the complete bullshit, now the real answer, sir. We didn't get it. We asked, is this a challenge list? Because that's what the experts told us. It could be nothing but voters they were targeting to challenge, to block their vote. And they said, oh, no. And I said, and why no? After all, if these are illegal voters, and you have to understand, I was talking to, there's a Republican state legislator in Arizona Russell Pierce, who said 5 million Mexicans had swum across the Rio Grande, dripping wet, to vote for Hillary Clinton. I kid you not. That's another article. That's in the news section. And they didn't want to say it was the challenge list for a very good reason. It's against the law, see, because you cannot target voters by race, even if you have reason. Because after they killed Martin Luther King, they passed a law called the Voting Rights Act of '65. He voted, and so we had an attorney, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who told us, yeah, it's not just creepy, it's against the law. It's a breaking rocks and a chain gang crime. It's a felony. 70,000 counts of felonious actions. Okay. But who were they challenging? What was this about? Okay. What was this about? Okay. And how did they do it? They sent letters to these voters. First class, very expensive. This is a multi-million-dollar operation. So they sent first class letters, in some cases registered letters to voters. And when they said, do not forward to the voter's registration address, and when the letters came back, they challenged the right of the voter to vote. They said, voting from a suspect address. Well, who was suspect? They sent it to students, black students. And when they were on that vacation, the letters came back. They challenged their vote. They sent it to men in homeless shelters who often don't get a chance to open their mail. But even in the United States of America, even people sleeping on park benches have the right to vote. Okay? Then, well, so far. And they sent to this group. Let me read you some names. Frederick Dunbar, Naval Air Station, Jacksonville. Lori Gaines, Naval Air Station, Jacksonville. Lavugan Harris, Naval Air Station, Jacksonville. Page after page after page of African American and Hispanic soldiers, sailors, airmen. What was that about? So we called, like CBS said, you gotta make a lot of calls, so we called them. And we called, for example, one on this list, a guy named Randall Proust, Naval Airman, African American. Called his home. Is Randy there? Does he live there? No, his wife said. No. Well, is he voting from this address? Well, yes, he is. Well, so then where is he living? Well, he's sent overseas. See, what they did was they sent letters to African American and Hispanic soldiers shipped overseas. Do not forward. The letters came back. When they sent in their absentee ballots from overseas, those absentee ballots were challenged, and the soldier, Randy didn't even know it, and his ballot was thrown out. Yeah. You think this is minor stuff? The Republican Party challenged 3 million voters in the 2004 election. And you read that in San Francisco Chronicle, right? Clip that one. Plus 570,000 absentee ballots were chucked in the garbage. Okay. Go to Baghdad, lose your vote. By the way, it's legal for a soldier to vote from Baghdad using their home address, even if you're black soldiers. So go to Baghdad, lose your vote, mission accomplished. Mr. President. Did Democrats challenge any? I didn't know I was taking questions from the audience. No, almost none. They have fought. It's against the law. Not that Democrats don't break the law, they're just not as good at it. They haven't fought it.
They don't have the Department of Dirty Tricks.
But the question, what is it? Remember, this stuff was subpoenaed in the prosecutor gate hearings. So what does that have to do with prosecutor gate? Who was in charge of this little challenge fix? Go back to the email that I haven't yet given Congressman Conyers. He'll love this stuff.
curious what you're waiting for.
Tim Griffin. Tim Griffin. Now, who is Tim Griffin and what is he doing today? On December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, a couple months ago, Karl Rove, Tim Griffin, a woman named Harriet Myers, arranged for the massacre of 8 relatively honest U.S. prosecutors. And that's well known. What isn't known is who replaced them. And in Arkansas, the new U.S. prosecutor is Tim Griffin. The perpetrator becomes the prosecutor. Mission accomplished. Yeah. Oh, by the way, tonight, and this is no kidding, I'm issuing an apology to a guy named David Iglesias, who's the prosecutor in New Mexico. See what happened? What happened was, I was investigating this guy, Pierce, who said 5 million Mexicans swimming across the border to vote for the Democrats. And I asked him, I said, can you, 5 million, I'll tell you what, just name 5. He said, how do I do that? I said, they registered to vote. You got their addresses. I said, if you got them, why don't you arrest them? He said, oh, we're going to do that. The U.S. attorney is going to do that. And then in New Mexico, a lady named, a blonde American Republican named Justine Fox Young, that's really her name, was waving papers on the floor of the legislature in New Mexico saying, I have evidence here of illegal voters. You know, people with names like Juarez, Hernandez, illegal voters, okay? So, by the way, so she's waving these papers, and well, of course, I'm waving papers too, just like, you know, Joe McCarthy. The difference is that I actually have documents. So I asked Justine, could you fax me those papers you're waving around? Maybe the fax machine was busted. I never got them. Could you give me the names of these voters? Just give me. She says, I have names here. Give me. Okay, I'll write it down. She says, all I knew was Hispanic. So I said, so how do I know what you're doing? She said, well, the U.S. attorney, I was getting this line from all over the country. The U.S. attorney is prosecuting these guys. How could this all happen at once? In the world of psychiatry, it's called folie à deux, which means, you know, like massive joint delusion. I smelled Karl Rove. So I called up, she said that the U.S. attorney Iglesias would back her story, so I called Iglesias' office. Now, this is a couple of years ago. He was still trying to keep his job. One last desperate attempt to hold on. But now someone was questioning him. So I asked him and his flack, a guy named Norm. Said, okay, is Iglesias, according to Fox Young, Iglesias is about to bring prosecutions against illegal voters. Now, I want to tell you why, by the way, this is so important to them. It's not only to cover the fact that they are flushing out voters. 3 million challenged, 1,090,000 of those votes thrown away. 500,000 absentees thrown away. Massive. They're talking about 2 people in New Mexico. Okay? But I didn't think that they had 2 people in New Mexico. And I wanted to find out. So I said, I used to be an investigator before I was an investigative reporter. So I worked for the Attorney General of New Mexico, by the way, as an investigator. So I said, okay, great. I've done investigations down there. What convictions do you have? No convictions. What indictments have you brought? No indictments. What investigations do you have open? Well, not exactly are we open. I said, now I worked with you guys as an investigator. What's a not exactly investigation? I'm unfamiliar. Well, we're not exactly, I said, what is it a we're not exactly investigation? I said, you don't have an open investigation, do you? You can't back her story, can you? And Iglesias' guy said, no, I guess you could say we can't. And I said, yes, I guess I will say that. I guess I will say that they freaking made up the evidence. fabricated it. And they fabricated it for a reason. They fabricated it because they wanted to not only cover their own tracks, but to create a hysteria. See, because all these speeches were made to push something called voter ID laws, okay? Now, you say, well, big deal. I have my passport. I just came back from skiing the Alps, and I don't have trouble. But all throughout the West, young Hispanics especially were being targeted. They walked in, they didn't like their ID. They didn't like the color of their ID. 300,000 people were turned away from the polls because of Republican challenges to their ID. 300,000. And now they want to pump it to 1 million with more than draconian ID laws. Okay? Now, were there 300,000 people illegally trying to vote? If so, you'd have to arrest them. Why not? They came in, got their names, bust them. But they're not criminals. Their only crime is voting while Hispanic. See, because remember, that's how I started on this game. In 2000, I'm working for BBC and I'm watching, the films of all the black people being flushed out. And I discovered that Katherine Harris and Jeb Bush had eliminated thousands, 97,000 voters, by the way, is the ultimate total. People who they said were felons who could not vote. And they were criminals. Their crime was voting while black. Here we are again. Now, there's a scene of Rove. So here we are again. And they want to build up these voter ID laws. But there's 300,000 people. They have to bust someone. They have to prove that there's a need for this law. But there was a line in the desert sand. Iglesias would go along with line. This is no man for all seasons, by the way. He was Ashcroft's protege, all right? But he wasn't going to bust some guys. His name is Iglesias. He wasn't going to bust some guys with Z at the end of their name and involve himself in a criminal conspiracy of malicious, wrongful prosecution because Karl Rove needed that fix. He wouldn't do it. And when he was asked point blank, he wouldn't do it. But unfortunately for Mr. Iglesias, read the rest of that February 7th email from Mr. Rove. He'd been doing some reading. Attached to the emails complaining about that British reporter is a PDF of an excerpt from the book Armmed Madhouse. Rove has been reading it with a blood-dipped highlighter. And unfortunately, there was David Iglesias. And he was the last name added to the executioner's list. Sorry, David. Now, okay. There's no sense stealing the White House unless you can squeeze the oil out. And there's more to Armed Madhouse in these investigations. In fact, it's only a couple of chapters out of 7. And I also want to talk to you about Iraq. See, because I want to straighten something out. There's conspiracy nuts among you. This is San Francisco who's decided, the Bay Area, in Oakland, there's no conspiracy nuts who think that George Bush had a secret plan for the oil field, to grab the oil fields of Iraq before the tanks rolled, and that's not true because he had 2 plans. We got both in the book. And I'm not going to go through them, but how he got them is nice. But I should say that the winning plan, written by, what's important here is that this past week, the Iraqi legislature passed a new oil law, which is straight out of this 323-page document, which we have. Well, actually, I shouldn't be showing it to you. It says contents confidential. So. From the State Department. It had all the State Department stamps all over it. When we finally got it, after 2 years of hunting and lawsuits and threats with the State Department, but it wasn't written by the State Department. This is where the Iraq oil law came out of, and it was written in Iraq's capital, Houston. by the oil company executive. Now, how do I know that? Because, like Karl Rove, they told me. They didn't mean to tell me, but they told me that they wrote it, and they gave me all the script. That's how I was able to get it, because they described it for me. Okay, but I want to warn you is that they do say James Baker, who's the consigliere for the Bush family, also represents Exxon Corporation. He also represents the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and his people wrote it up with some of the other big oil chieftains. And when Harper's Magazine published a portion of Armmed Madhouse in the magazine, they called up a whole crew of high-powered lawyers who called up Harper's and said, "We are suing you because not only did Greg Palast misquote us, he didn't even speak to us." I said, "Well, I'll retract the story. Just tell me what part of this audio tape is not you." I warned Dan rather not to do this at home. I'm not kidding. By the way, that's another one. The hit woman who knocked out the prosecutors with Griffin and Rove is a woman, Harriet Myers. Harriet Myers. Now, Harriet Myers, as you know, was nominated to the Supreme Court of the United States by George W. Bush. And her previous legal experience was she was head of the Texas State Lottery. Interesting trajectory. See, there's a story that I wrote and that I produced for BBC on how George Bush Sr. used his influence to get little George out of the war in Vietnam. Dan Rather saw that, decided to put it on American TV, and I said, "Don't do this at home." BBC, you'll see it in the book, in a chapter called, bonus chapter in the book, called The Lynching of Dan Rather. BBC has never retracted BBC has never retracted a comma of that story. But there's something else we reported, unlike CBS, which grabbed its ankles. By the way, the head of CBS, Leslie Moonves, the president, dismissed Mr. Rather and his producer, saying that they refused to show the evidence that George Bush got into the Air Guard on his own merit. He took a test. He likes testing. He took a test to get into the Air Guard. He scored 25 out of 25th percentile out of 100. 1 percentage point above too dumb to fly. That's true. Anyway, he said they had evidence that the fix was not in. So I told Mr. Moonves, we contacted him for BBC, and we decided to use market incentives. We offered him $100,000 to give us the evidence, and we put it on the air. I never got it. Still got the money. Maybe I'll give it to media. Okay. Anyway, but how do you keep such a thing silent? Someone has to be paid. Harriet Myers took care of it all. So see, how did Myers go from the lottery to the Supreme Court? Almost. Right? She had George's war medals in her pocket. Exactly. Now, there's another war. I know a lot of you think that the war's gone badly. I won't go through the whole thing. See, by the way, just so you know, the plan that won was not about getting the oil in Iraq. And I want you to know that. It's really true. It wasn't. Exxon does not send its exploration company, the 101st Airborne, to find oil and bring it back so that Greg Brooks can fill up that yellow Hummer of his parked house. So you can get cheap oil. They send in the 101st to find the oil and turn it off. It was about controlling the oil, making sure Saddam and Iraq never produced the oil they could produce. Remember, they were very good at keeping the oil out of the market. And in Iraq, we had the Oil for Food program. They got very little food, we got very little oil. And they liked it that way. okay? But that wasn't enough. I know many of you think that is a mess, a disaster in Iraq. Harry Reid says we're losing the war, but Harry, someone's winning the war. See, when Bill Clinton was president, the price of oil was 20 bucks per barrel, and today, the price of oil is not going below $50 a barrel, $20 a barrel, $50 a barrel. Mission accomplished. Don't kid yourself. Now, read it. But there's another war going on. The war, well, the class war, as a whole section. There's another war going on. The war on terror. And there we're making some progress. I got to admit it. After 5 years of hunting for Osama bin Laden, the Department of Homeland Security finally captured Greg Palast. No kidding, I was investigating. I went down to New Orleans and I was filming for a subversive operation called Democracy Now! Which is sponsoring the Armmed Madhouse. And I really was charged, I kid you not, I was charged with violating the Patriot Act, with terrorism, basically. Me and my producer. Now, I wasn't arrested. That's a false rumor. They couldn't find me. I'm on television. I got a website. I wear a hat. It's on my book cover. Okay. These are the guys looking for bin Laden, right? I was actually quite concerned because I thought, my God, terrorism charges, I won't be able to fly home. Then I was really nervous because I did fly home. What was so dangerous? I was filming critical infrastructure. I thought I was filming a bunch of poor people in mobile homes, which I was doing. Because, see, as you saw for those of you who caught that film, Big Easy to Big Empty, which I did for Democracy Now! and BBC and Link. Thank you, Link TV, or something like that. So I'm filming this stuff. Because I want people to see what we've done. I wanted America to look in this mirror. Old people, young people, 100 miles from home, 100 miles from work, remember. They lost their jobs. They couldn't get to work. It's not a prison because in prison you get a home furlough, they have no homes. But they're sucking this soot, and I wanted you to see that. But they were afraid that Osama would see that. I said, yeah, I mean, all he has to do is pretend that he's a poor black Democrat, you get an Airstream right next to the Exxon plant. It's like, okay. So we went back and forth. Actually, it could be scary, because they really can ruin you. And if I wasn't working for BBC or Democracy Now!, obviously I'd lost my job. It's trouble. I'd be measured for an orange suit. But finally, the lawyers convinced them that if Osama really wanted to get in there, he could just go to Google Map. I feel better.
Well, on Monday, just look on YouTube.
But what was it? It wasn't about national security. It was about political insecurity. What I was finding. I was interested. Before I was a journalist, I had a real job. I was working as an investigator. I actually worked on an evacuation plan myself for Long Island, New York, which is like the richest standard metropolitan statistical area in America. Rich homes, all that stuff. The evacuation plan was 6 volumes thick. Every police station had them and knew where all the hospitals were. There was no part of the plan that said that people leave the area face down floating. Right? How'd that happen? So when I saw what was going down in New Orleans and I saw this complete mess, I said, where's their plan? So I called FEMA and I said, I want a copy of the New Orleans evacuation plan. And they said, Kid you not. We can't find it. I said, did it wash away? Is it white? What? You can't find it? Okay. Then they came back to me a second time. They called me back a couple days later and said, it's confidential. The evacuation plan is confidential. I'm feeling very safe now. Because Osama could be there, you wouldn't want to know how to get out, right? Because, okay, then, all right. Well, there was a reason it was confidential and couldn't be found and all that. It's because it had been handed to a contractor. The plan was developed by a contractor. Normally, government does this, but now we privatize government. Government is now the problem, not the solution, so we privatize it. And it was handed over to this company called Innovative Emergency Management, which is a cool name. But, and I wondered, well, so I looked them up. What's their qualifications? And right here it says, IEM team to develop catastrophic hurricane disaster plan for New Orleans, June 3rd, 2004. A year before the hurricane, year and a half before the hurricane. And they have, part of our team will include James Lee Witt. Well, that's impressive because he was head of FEMA under Clinton. He was a very well-known emergency expert. I was impressed. So I called Mr. Witt and said, I don't know who these guys are. It's right there on the FEMA press release. Okay, so I figured I'd go for Amy at Democracy Now! And figure out why these guys were hired. So I went to their offices in Baton Rouge, walked in, and of course I was asking them, where's the plan? We can't find it either. What's your experience? They said they had lots of experience. I asked what cities they've done planning for before New Orleans, before they got this contract in the most dangerous area. They even say here, by the way, you gotta read these. Okay. Given this area's vulnerability, unique geographic location, elevation, and troubled escape routes, a plan that facilitates a rapid and effective hurricane response and recovery is critical. I'll say, the nation's most vulnerable location. June 2004. Responsible to replace the homes. They rebuilt those $3 million homes. They replaced the beach, grain by grain, lovingly, so that the bond traders would not miss their summer in the Hamptons. But when the federal levees broke in New Orleans, they're still denying it was levee failure. Still denying. Now, long night. Rove. There was a woman there on screen. We were filming in New Orleans. The only dry housing left was the beautiful public housing. Because you have to understand, it's concrete walls and ceilings. And so it did not get destroyed. It's on high levels, hurricane-proof. The most beautiful housing in New Orleans, to some extent, that remained high, dry, and just perfect for the new gentry. So even though those public housing units were in wonderful shape, the only good housing left in the city, if you go there today, what you'll see is bars welded across the windows. This is almost 2 years now. Bars welded across the windows. Steel doors. They spent millions. And what we had was a woman who had returned from Texas with her 3 children, hearing that she could get back into her apartment. Night was falling. And they told her, she called them the police, but they're the new mercenary police. It's an organization called Blackwater. Get used to it, it's your future. And the Blackwater police, the mercenary police force, said, go into your house and we will arrest you. And she turned to me and said, what am I going to do, mister? Where am I going? And that's the question I have for you tonight. what are we going to do, mister? Where are we going? That's the point of this gathering tonight. Now, what can I do? I don't know. I mean, Karl Rove was thrilled that no U.S. in that email, no U.S. media has picked up the investigations of Palast, and is thrilled about that little attachment of Armmed Madhouse. That's why I had to write more of it. I was so pleased. In fact, so I've added like another 25% to the book in the new paperback. I'm adding Velcro to the back. I asked the publishers again, more as they do more things. Doesn't stop. So that's what I can give you, the information. That's all I have. That's all I have. And in fact, when I say I want to give you the information, I want you to buy it. I want you to get it out there because it supports our investigative team. But what I also want you to do, it's the first New York Times bestseller. By the way, today it's the #1 current affairs book in America. Karl, and still there's no U.S. media coverage. It's the first New York Times bestseller that I am not copyrighted. There's a Commons copyright. Anyone can use it. I want you to take it. I want you to photocopy it. I want you to get it out. I want you to take stuff off the website. I want you to send it out. There's a chapter. People ask me. There's a new chapter, The Theft of 2008. There's a chapter busted on New Orleans, but there's a chapter also, the new chapter, The Theft of 2008. Because people always ask me, well, are they going to be, wrote on 2000, you wrote on 2004, are they going to steal 2008? No. They've already stolen it. They've already knocked off, by the way, 1.6 million voters already. Already, Mr. Rove, Mr. Griffin. Okay, that's what this is all about. The prosecutors firing. Okay, they're already stealing it right now. So then I added another chapter called How to Steal Back Your Vote. Photocopy it, send it out. There's a lot of information there. Like, there was a teacher who came up to me and said, what about all this testing? Yes, please take the section, No Child's Behind Left, and stick it on every school door. You know, I mean, so I want you to get it out. It's not my information, it's my book, but it's your information. Get it out. I don't care how. In fact, we also have alternative, Jello Biafra, you know, from the Dead Kennedys. Thank you, Jello. He's produced through Alternative Tentacles a wonderful CD called Live from the Armmed Madhouse, in which we not only have some of my words, but we also have dance tracks, samples. I mean, use it, whatever it takes. We're not doing anything subversive, Mr. Rove, we're just dancing. We got those out there. We got the DVD of New Orleans, but most important, and unfortunately we don't have enough books tonight, but we'll try to get as many to you as we can. Take the information. It is not mine. It is yours. What are we going to do? Get it and spread it. That's why the money raised tonight is going to the Media Alliance to keep alive programs like Flashpoints, to keep alive programs in our work with Democracy Now! Okay. Let me leave you with this thought. Let me leave you with this thought. And it's not mine. Something George Bush said. You know, you remember when he said the tanks, when he said Saddam Hussein has 48 hours to get out of town. That was March 17th of 2003, just before the tanks rolled, right? And he said that. Remember when he said he was a war hero, he wasn't afraid of bullets. Yeah, right. So he said a couple things to the Iraqi people. He said, first, do not destroy oil wells. I can't make that. But he also said something I completely agree with, the thought to leave you with. And I'll answer all your questions out there. I'll sign your books. I'll sign your DVDs. I'll sign your hats. I'll sign Greg Proops. The president also said something I agree with. He said, do not fight for a dying regime. It is not worth your life. Thank you so much.
that.